Hey, long time no see. It is June, PTSD Awareness Month, post-traumatic stress disorder. I think I've posted a couple of videos about that, so you may or may not have seen those. If not, check out the channel. Welcome to new subscribers. Today is gut-wrenching for me. If you've watched enough of my videos and me trying to explain mental illness and depression and trauma and all that jazz, you will know that those things are near and dear to my heart for a reason, and I'm trying to hold back tears because this has been a tough week in Hollywood and a tough week for mental health educators. Kate Spade, the handbag extraordinaire, committed suicide by hanging on Tuesday of this week. This morning I find out Anthony Bourdain, everyone's beloved chef and daredevil eating weird foods, was found dead in his hotel room, and I believe it was from an overdose. Kate suffered with anxiety and depression for years. Anthony with heroin addiction and recovery for years, and undoubtedly depression. Let me say this, and I can't say this enough: you are not selfish if you attempt to hurt yourself, and suicide is a form of self-harm. Let me say this: suicide is not selfish, you are not weak, and it's not a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Depression is never a temporary problem. This is a real medical condition which requires a clinical intervention. It's not something that goes away on its own, and it's not something you just get over. It's not something that if left untreated that it will just basically dissipate. No, depression is a real medical illness. It sometimes has warning signs, sometimes it doesn't. Follow me on Instagram and AJ Wright Mental, WRITE, and you'll see my last couple of posts about the two of them and about warning signs or not, and some things that maybe you had not ever realized about depression. Depression doesn't care if you are worth millions, and if you have a loving family or a support circle of some sort, and you are seemingly happy and you have all of these accomplishments and you've mastered so many trades and you're so successful and adored and beloved and all that great stuff. No one is immune to depression. No one is immune to suicidal ideation, as they call it. In other words, thinking about suicide, having suicidal thoughts. No one is immune to a mental illness. That thing that we're not talking about, crazy or psychosis, but those things that everyday life can lead to, the worrying and the anxiety and the fear and the pressure. And I'm sure in Anthony's case, shame of some sort and feelings of emptiness, which is common with addiction. You're not some bottom feeder. Hear me. I'm telling you these things because I hear it, and we in the mental health community hear it all the time as a justification, I guess, for why people want to spread the stigma that they do. You're not weak. These are real medical problems. You can't ridicule someone or condemn them for feeling the way that they are feeling. You can't blame them for the problems that they have in their life. Even if someone, may be responsible for their own downfall, still you cannot ridicule them. I'm sure Anthony has had enough judgment in his life. I read one article when he said, I became I think rich in my 40s or something like that, and a dad in my 50s. It's like buying a new car, a really, really cool new car. He fell in love within the last how many ever years, and his girlfriend, oh my God, she was just so distraught in a video that she made and posted online. And she's angry and she's hurt and she's shocked all in one. You can just tell by the tone of her voice and her tears and her distress, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that a person was hurting just that much for apparently years. Imagine how she's feeling now, feeling that way ongoing, constantly, every day. Anyone can be driven to suicide. My heart goes out to Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain's families. I've been there, done that. Thankfully, I was found in time, but I want people to understand suicide is not an act of selfishness. Depression is real. You can start by understanding, warning signs. Again, sometimes there are, sometimes they aren't. And even if you know a person especially if you know a person has some past issues with depression or anxiety or addiction or anything like that, it should always be somewhere in your mind that, hey, this is possible in their life, just as it's possible in anybody else's life. This suicide that people talk about and self-harm, it may not be obvious. It may not be something, hey, that I've ever thought in a million years could happen, but guess what? It does. And we see in both of these cases, despite all the success, that this is what has happened. Note some of these warning signs. I posted it on Instagram this morning. Understand that, people, judgment and tough love doesn't help. Talking to Grandma and Einstein might feel okay for the moment, but you need clinical intervention. These are medical problems, not just, a temporary phase. This is not a temporary issue. You need sometimes meds, oftentimes therapy. Where to go? What do I do? How much is this going to cost? It's worth saving a life. I'll say this and get off of here before I can't upload this video. You can start with a hotline. The National Suicide and Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K. You can start with support groups in your area. Just go onto Google, put in your zip code, and say, hey, where do I go? Where do I take a loved one or a friend for help with depression or with, suicidal thinking? This is what I'm noticing. That pattern of things that's different and outside of the norm for that person. It's not just, okay, they're giving away prized possessions. They could be happy as a lark. They could also be reckless and not care what happens to them. Speeding, dangerous sports, irritability, sudden changes in weight, up or down, not really sleeping. How many times are you hearing the off-color jokes or the jokes about death? How often are they saying, I can't take it anymore, or I just want to give up? Pay attention to these things, okay? Yeah, it's really sad, but before I totally break down, I'm gonna get off of here. Find me on Instagram and Twitter at AJ Wright Mental. I love you guys. Please, please, please pay close attention to the people in your life and just be there for them. They don't need the judgment. Tough love doesn't work. Okay, and as far as PTSD, this is not something that only vets suffer. Trauma is trauma, and anything can traumatize you. All right, y'all, I love you. I'm gonna get off of here. Bye-bye.